Hey everyone, this is Steve Good, and welcome back to our next episode of the Coin Chat, joined by our regular Yuri Cataldo, and today's special guest, Joe Wasson, otherwise known as Tall Joe. Guys, welcome.
Hi.
How are you, Joe?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Very good. So, before we get started, I want to just do a quick mention that you've also got a website that's a blog site. The URL is
talljoe.com.
Tall Joe.
TALLJOE.com.
Now, why is it called Tall Joe? Not for me, because I already know why, but tell the users, the listeners.
Well, my name is Joe, and I am tall. And so when I first started in the Burning Man community, one big thing is your playa name, the Burning Man name that people know you as. And a few are being tossed around. And I was in a band at the time, or not yet in a band, but my friend was in a band, and I was going to go play with them. And his name was Joey, and he said to Hannah, he's like, Joe's going to be playing bass with us this week at practice. And she's like, oh, Tall Joe? And that one just stuck.
Yeah.
And so
that I didn't know.
That was, back in 2004, 2005, and it stuck with me ever since. So I've sort of built a brand around it.
And your GitHub is also on Tall Joe as well, isn't it?
Yeah. GitHub is Tall Joe. Twitter is Tall Joe. Instagram didn't quite get Tall Joe. There's another Tall Joe. I don't claim to be the tallest
taller, Joe.
No, I don't know relatively how tall I am to the other Tall Joe, but we are both a Tall Joe.
It probably doesn't matter. If you say you're taller, it just sounds cool.
Yeah. I was introducing myself. There was about four of us in front of a group introducing ourselves, and the first guy's like, hi, my name is Joe, and he's taller than I am. And so when it came to like, oh, my name is Tall Joe, I don't claim to be the tallest, as pointed at him, but...
Wow.
Joe, that is awesome. I also love that you're a bass player. So Tall Joe, the bass player. Are you still in a band? Do you still play bass?
Not in a band currently. Focusing more of my side time on having a recording studio. So I record other people who are much better than I am and make their music sound great, because I'm good at that part.
So you're both musically talented and you're, as I would say, a technical genius.
Sure, I'll agree with that.
How can you deny it? You're on the podcast, so it must be true.
Yeah.
Well, already, even in the pre-chat before we started the podcast today, you already demonstrated that Yuri and I are pretty much not technical, and that's why we should just leave it to you.
Exactly.
So I'm very happy to have you here. So first off, before we jump into all about the S words in cryptocurrency like Satoshis and Snarks and shards and other things, just a quick one for you, Joe. So you've been in the crypto world for a while. You've been doing things like smart contracts and you've invested in crypto. Have you tried spending Bitcoin, and have you got any good stories you could share with us?
Well, the one that I bring out is, so I was in Bitcoin in 2011, and I don't know what ended up happening with all of that Bitcoin. But I do know that in 2013, 2014, I sold 50 Bitcoin for $13 each. And that was to buy some mining hardware, which took 14 months to arrive. And I eventually only mined about 4 Bitcoin out of that before it became uneconomical to mine. So I'm a little sour against mining at the moment. Like, yeah, I'd rather just buy the coins and hold them than spend a bunch of money on mining equipment that, may not get a return. Because I got my dollars back, obviously, but I didn't get the coins back. And so that's probably my big story is like, yeah, should have held. And of course, I sold another big chunk of Bitcoin. It would have been 2015. Ended up selling a bunch for like around 1,700 to 1,000 each. and you know where it's at right now. So, and then also recently there's a couple of things like cryptocurrency security stuff like hardware wallets and the like, which can only be purchased with Bitcoin. And at one point, the transaction fees were so high that to send the Bitcoin to pay for the transaction cost more than the physical shipping of the item from Europe to my house.
Oh no!
It was $24 for shipping and $25 for the transaction fee.
Oh my god!
In rough numbers.
Disaster.
Yeah, but transaction costs have come way down. The network is less spammy. We now processing more transactions. So things are much better on the Bitcoin side.
Yeah, absolutely.
But still, if I'd kept all like everyone, just about, if I'd kept all the Bitcoin that I'd ever had, then it would be fine.
And you wouldn't be on this podcast right now, and you'd be sitting on a yacht somewhere.
Probably, yeah. I was talking with somebody, and we were talking Bitcoin, and she's like, yeah, I did some stupid stuff. Like, she doesn't know much about Bitcoin or cryptocurrency. It was like, yeah, back in like college, my friends and I wanted to throw a party, so we bought some Bitcoin for some purpose to buy something, and that transaction fell through. And I'm like, oh, well, do you still have that Bitcoin? She's like, I actually don't know. It might be on my computer somewhere. I was like, oh. It's like, yeah, we bought about $1,200 worth of Bitcoin. And I pulled up, what's the price of Bitcoin at this particular time? It was like 7 cents.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, wow. I did the math, and I said, if you have all those Bitcoin, do you want to see how much it would be worth right now? And she's like, okay. And I pointed the calculator at her, and it's roughly about $40 million.
Oh, no.
And like she started breathing, like had trouble breathing and turned red, and like, oh my gosh, I need to like call people and stuff. And so, got back and talked with her just recently, and nope, they never got the Bitcoin back. It was lost forever in some, some satin street of some sort, a Silk Road maybe.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Oh.
Yeah.
What a sad story. You're going to give us a happy story to finish this episode, though, right?
Are there any happy stories in crypto?
Well, the crypto that you bought years ago that's worth more now.
Yeah.
And you still hodl.
Yeah. I could say stuff, but not just yet. So.
Well, a year from now, we'll get you back on the episode, and you can tell us about how much wealthy you are a year from now.
Yeah.
It's not a bad plan. So on a more technical note, I know we wanted to talk to you about a couple of things. I'm not even sure where to begin, so I'll just throw out the 3 words I'd really like to talk about, and you can kind of jump in and tell us in whichever order you'd like to go, and then we can ask you questions on each of the topics. How's that sound?
Okay.
So I've got good. Door number 1, which is called Snarks, or zSnarks. Door number 2, which is Satoshis. And door number 3, which is Shards.
Cool. Do you have a preference, or should I just...
Not at all. I'd love to just kind of jump into all 3 and learn them, from you.
Okay. Well, I'll probably start with the simplest one then. Satoshis, or Satoshis, or however you want to say it. Those are essentially the smallest unit of Bitcoin that exists at the moment. So one of the things that people are initially confused about, oh my gosh, a Bitcoin costs $8,593.57. Like, I can't afford a Bitcoin. Well, no, you can afford a portion of a Bitcoin.
Right.
It's divisible by 100 million, I think.
It's 8 decimals, right?
Yeah. So that's 100 million. So a Satoshi is 1/100 millionth of a Bitcoin. So you could probably afford, a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of a cent in order to buy a Satoshi. You probably can't spend it because it costs money to move money.
Yeah, it costs $10 to spend that fraction of a penny.
Exactly.
I think that's what they call dust.
Yeah, so a lot of people talk about Bitcoin in millibtcs, so 1/1000th of a Bitcoin, which is going to be 10,000 Satoshis. So right now, for example, Ethereum is 61.29 millibtcs to buy one Ethereum, and so that's a bit easier to talk about than Ethereum costs 0.006129 Bitcoin.
Yeah, they kind of did they reversed all the numbers on us, so we have to think backwards rather than 123.12. We have to think 0.0000123 to kind of achieve the same thing in a weird way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I may, for those hardcore math people out there, I may actually be getting my mathematics wrong. It is fairly early in the morning, my time zone, so I apologize if my math coprocessor is not up to speed yet.
Joe, I think I've heard of this somewhere, but do you think that there will be further protocols that subdivide them, like the Satoshis, even further beyond 100th of a millionth Bitcoin?
Probably. So there's some predictions that say a Bitcoin is going to be worth $1 million each.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can only subdivide $1 million by 10, or by 100, then you really can't buy a candy bar with Bitcoin. And so there was going to be ways that you're going to be able to subdivide them further. Either they'll change the protocol so that so Ethereum you can divide by 18 decimal places, or they'll just create a side channel, much like a Lightning Network or something, where basically, all right, if you want to transact in smaller amounts, you go and do this on this other network that's subdividable even further, and then when it all gets settled back on the main Bitcoin network in Satoshis, but you're actually playing around with something way smaller.
How interesting.
Yeah. So maybe a protocol change, probably not. I would just see it being a side chain is the most likely.
Okay.
But simply based on how the Bitcoin community decides things, it's way easier to build a side chain than to get support for major protocol revisions.
Sure.
As we saw, the big hubbub that happened kind of fall, winter of last year.
Oh, with the whole SegWit and the Bitcoin Cash and the
forks and forks and forks.
Yeah, the forks and fork knots.
Yes.
Well, we have to keep that fork theme going somehow,
Yeah.
Cool. That's really interesting.
It's really funny, the fervor over forks. People are like, oh my gosh, another fork. And I'm like, that's not necessarily a good thing.
No, I mean, you can see what it did to Z Classic. It absolutely tanked the coin to nothing.
Yeah.
From $200.
That happens in certain ways. So when Ethereum has had, and I'm sure you talked about this on the fork episode, but Ethereum had hard forks where essentially the old coin still exists, but nobody mines on it and it's worth zero now.
Correct.
And the new coin just has the same name.
Exactly.
And so Z Classic seemed more like a hard fork of that sort. But they changed the name and they brought in Bitcoin to BTCP and all this sort of stuff. So it very much seemed like Z Classic was meant to be abandoned afterwards. But it still stuck around and people tried to trade it, and people are like, oh my gosh, I'm losing all my Z Classic. I'm like, well, it's still there. It's just another name now. And that is the one that has value. So people got a little, people look at Bitcoin Cash and to a lesser extent Bitcoin Gold that still maintained a value. Like Bitcoin Cash is 990 each right now. And so, wow, that's huge, but it's based on the support of the network. And so the Bcash had a lot of support behind it. Otherwise it wouldn't have been able to happen. And Bitcoin Gold was like, oh, well, nope, not happening.
And then there's my favorite one, Bitcoin Diamond.
There's Bitcoin Platinum, Bitcoin Diamond, Bitcoin all
Superman or something. I forget what it's called now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's because so it's really interesting. Early on in crypto, all forks were mainly forks of the code base. Like, oh, let's take Bitcoin, let's do a search and replace and call it foosball coin. And now we've got our own cryptocurrency and trying to create a new chain from scratch. Now that Bitcoin is so huge, it's far more lucrative so long as you're trying to do mostly the same thing and only want to change a couple aspects of the protocol to just fork off of Bitcoin because you've got a huge user base already.
Right.
So you're like, hey, you don't have to start from zero and try to acquire coin and all that sort of stuff. You've got coin already. It's the Bitcoin that you have, so just use that.
So Joe, quick question on this. Why don't more of these crypto ICOs just fork off of a Bitcoin to launch their project and then have kind of an established network rather than doing airdrops or starting from scratch and, doing it all over?
Mainly because, at least the way I see it, mainly because if you're trying to do an ICO and you're trying to raise money, it doesn't help to just have, millions of units of currency in existence that other people have, because people already have Bitcoin. So
right.
They're not going to buy from you your token or coin or whatever. So
fair comment. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, if you want a utility token, like, oh, we're going to create a token that allows you to buy streaming music or purchase cats or whatever, then or turkeys,
yeah,
or whatever plural noun you want to put in there. It's
Joe's going to go. Joe, you're going to go back and listen to the other episodes now and try to figure out why did Steve just say turkeys?
Yeah. Oh, I see. It's a callback.
It is. It's an ongoing theme for us.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, there are a lot of crypto turkeys out there.
Gobble, gobble.
Yeah.
Got to up gobble that one there, Joe.
Up gobble.
Yeah.
I gobble. That's what I do. Is I gobble up coins and then I gobble.
Maybe we should move on to Snarks and Shards, Joe.
Snarks and Shards. All right. That sounded a little snarky, so I guess
it was a little snarky. So let's go in for the snarky remarks, and maybe the next episode we'll call is, what the snark is a snark.
Yeah. Well, Snarks.
Sharks and other fine friends. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, we're not talking about stuff that Lewis Carroll created. Snarks don't have feathers and bite or whispers and scratch.
You got my reference. That's good. I love it.
Nor are Snarks colorful underwater creatures that have straws coming out of the top of their head.
Although if we all had a lot of Snarks, maybe we'd be sitting on beaches in the Caribbean instead of worrying about crypto anymore.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So what a snark is, it's short for, and you'll see why it's short in a moment, for succinct, non-interactive arguments of knowledge. And so it's basically some mathematic voodoo that allows a prover to prove that they have done some computation or have some information that can be verified by another party.
Yep.
Without them having to talk to each other. So succinct means that the message that gets passed is smaller than the original data or the original computation. So, if you have to calculate pi to 10,000 digits and show your work, well, that's really difficult, but you can just say, oh, here's pi to 10,000 digits, and here's proof that I actually did the work, but not the work. Don't have to show the work. So that's the succinct part. And the non-interactive part is that the two sides aren't talking to each other. So, like, if you were questioning me about whether I did something, you would ask me some questions and I'll give you some answers. And then after some period of time, you'd be like, okay, yeah, you actually did what you claimed you did. But in this case, we want non-interactive. We want it to be sitting on a blockchain, and then you come along later somebody comes along later and says, oh yeah, they've done the work. They actually have the coins or whatever.
Because it's already on the ledger, so you don't have to go and ask them. You can just check it's there, move on, next step.
Exactly. And so
I know you were out for a drink last night, Joe. Or not.
Or not. Yes, the pseudonymous ledger, where at some point everybody's going to know what you spent all your money on. Just maybe not today or tomorrow.
Right.
And so Snarks are really interesting in doing a lot of things. And where they really get interesting is something called ZK Snarks, or zero knowledge Snarks. So
is that where the Z or zSnark comes in?
Yeah. Well, I think with zSnark, you actually mean ZK Snark. But
okay, ZK Snark then.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get snarky about whether I got it right or wrong now, by the way.
Yeah. Because the ZK stands for zero knowledge. And so basically what that adds on to the Snarks I just talked about is you can prove that you've done a calculation. You prove that you have the result, but you don't let anyone else know what data you used to do that proof. So I could prove to you that I multiplied two numbers together and got the result, but you wouldn't know what the two numbers I multiplied together were, just that I have the correct result.
And how do we know that you know that the answer is right?
That's the voodoo maths part of Snarks.
Oh, wow.
So what this is used for a lot is in Zcash and other cryptocurrencies that tend to be around privacy.
Oh, right.
And Ethereum now has support for Snarks, for ZK Snarks, that Zcash uses. Depending on the implementation,
right,
you can obfuscate the sender, the receiver, or the value that's being sent. So the simplest one is I'm going to send coins to Yuri, but I don't want anybody to know how many coins I sent. Mm-hmm. But later on, Yuri wants to be able to spend those coins, or some fraction of them, has to be able to prove that he has those coins without actually saying how many coins he has. And so that's the main the exciting use of Snarks that people like to point to. I think that there's going to be much more utilitarian uses for them that I'm excited to start using.
And what would that be?
So let's talk Ethereum. So let's say I have a smart contract, and if you want to buy something, you can enter a promo code and get a discount. And so this discount is built into the smart contract. Well, the smart contract is public on the ledger. You might not actually have the source code printed, but if your password is Seattle is awesome, that's the promo code, and you go in and look at the contract, Seattle is awesome is right there. Or maybe even just the hash. The SHA-256 hash of Seattle is awesome is right there.
Right.
And so now I want you to send me the promo code. Well, you send the promo code to the smart contract. If you send it in plain text, everybody sees the promo code and gets applied. So now everyone can get the promo. Or if you send just the hash, you say, I have this hash. Well, the hash itself is just a value that you can look at. And so you can look at the transaction history of the smart contract and know what the promo code is. And if you're doing something else like redeeming credits or logging into something, somebody can come along, look at your transaction before it's even hit a block while it's still a pending transaction,
Right.
create their own transaction, higher gas price, and come in and front run your contract, your transaction, and steal the funds that you were trying to get. So there are various ways that you could sort of do this, but because everything is public knowledge on the Ethereum, it gets really, really tricky, and you end up having to deal with like, you know, some sort of side chain thing going on. Like you talk to a website, you give the promo code to the website, and it turns around and turns it into says, yes, you have this promo code, and signs it, and then gives it to, then you send that to the contract, and the contract can prove that signature. That all kind of sucks. But what you can do with Snarks is say, all right, I have this promo code, and a Snark basically runs a function on it. So that function could be, could even be a hash function. So you come in and you say, all right, I'm running this, and you put in some other value so that you salt the hash, so you get a different hash value, and then you send it the hash. But then you say, all right, here is my proof that I had the original phrase. And so the smart contract can prove that you indeed, in fact, did have the promo code Seattle is awesome. Mm. The smart contract does not reveal that promo code. The transaction does not reveal the promo code. All you have is this mathematical proof that you had the promo code at one point.
Wow.
And so now you can get the discount, but you're not revealing any information to the rest of the network.
So basically what you're saying is we've created a whole kind of network of jobs for cryptographers which didn't exist 20 years ago.
Well, actually, they probably did exist, but the job existed, just not as many as there are right now. Cryptocurrency, the crypto part, is making mathematics and cryptographers relevant. They've always been kind of relevant because you want to maintain secrecy. You know, you've got you need to protect your website. So yeah, the cryptographers have been in back rooms with their pencils and scribbling down things.
Of course, like the Enigma story from the Nazis of the way they encrypted and encoded stuff, and the U.S. trying to decipher and decode it. So obviously it goes back some time, but I just look at the amount of cryptography that's necessary and the level of sophistication. It's created a whole new kind of realm of jobs that just on a whole other level now, really. And fascinating.
Yeah. I find it interesting actually that you give you say the U.S. was trying to crack it. I mean, crack
the U.S., the Brits,
they were,
yeah.
But Poland actually was the first to get and crack the first part of Enigma, and so you should give credit to your wife.
Absolutely. Well, I didn't know that, and she never told me, so she'll hear the episode, and she'll probably, give me a few snarky comments now. Yeah. Thank you, Joe.
Poland started it off, and then, the UK, and with, a lot of the Allies' help, did a lot more of the cracking and built the first computer, and it's a really interesting story, but that's a story for another
podcast. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, anything else on the Snarks before we jump into my favorite one?
Probably not. I mean, there's just so much more we could talk about with Snarks, but it's all variations on the same theme that I've talked about. It's going to be really, really interesting from a privacy standpoint, because Snarks are going to drive a lot of privacy, especially if you're able to send and receive coins without anybody but people involved in the transaction knowing that that's happened and how much has been sent.
Well, there's definitely some value in that, because even just seeing how people can send Ether from one to another, and if you're part of a channel where that person's Ether address is posted, then everybody can go look at their Ether address and see how much is in their account, which is, maybe a little foolhardy on their part to even put it in the channel in the first place. But I can certainly see where there's some value in having more privacy attached to people's accounts, so that at least your privacy is private.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's one of the main differences between Bitcoin and Ethereum is Bitcoin, you have these things called unspent transaction outputs, and you can receive coins to a bunch of different addresses, which are basically the same seed. And so they're essentially one wallet, but you can't tell from the outside, and you can selectively spend those outputs. So I can spend all of the money that, has been given to me by my employer in a hypothetical situation, but never ever spend the coins that were given to me in some shady backroom dealing, hypothetically.
Right.
And so those are never connected back to me. And if I want to spend those coins, I spend them in a separate transaction. And so even though they're all the same wallet and the same seed, because the addresses have been derived in different places, like, you can't connect the two. Ethereum, if they're all sent to the same address, then there's just a big number. It's more like a bank account in that aspect. So,
okay.
So Ethereum, there's a number that's how many Ethereum that you have, and with tokens on the Ethereum network, it's exactly the same thing. The smart contract just keeps a balance for you.
Right.
But in Bitcoin, there is no number. The only way but it is basically you look at a public address and you count up all the unspent transactions, unspent transaction outputs, UTXOs in the lingo, and that's how much Bitcoin that address has. But because we now have these really awesome hierarchical derived wallets, and every time you receive money, you get it to a separate address, which has its own private key. Those transactions look distinct from each other. You can't tell if they're the same person or not until you create a transaction collecting multiple unspent transaction outputs into a single input to another transaction. And then, you've correlated those, and now they know who they belong to.
Wow, Joe, that is just, I had no idea. This is really great stuff, and I really appreciate your sharing all this. This is just crazy stuff. It's
You're welcome.
Goes to show how much there is, that even as much as we all know, how much we still don't know when it comes to crypto, because it's just such a deep field now. It's just evolving so quickly. So
yeah,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say something and I forgot. I know that, like, a lot of government agencies refer to Bitcoin and cryptocurrency as prosecution futures, because they may not know who an address belongs to now, but at some point in the future, they might link an address to a person, and once they do that, they can start following the chain forwards or backwards, and it's like, here's this, this terrorist, and they have sent money to these people and received money from these addresses. Well, let's follow the chain, either with a pipe wrench or, seeing what else we connect. And
right.
So, okay, now we know all the people that they've interacted with, and they just knocked down. And so, they may not know who you are now, but if you funded terrorists now, in 5 years, they might be able to find out that you've done so, and then they'll come knocking on your door. So operational security with regards to how you treat your coins is really, really important, because they just need to, this person checked this address or sent a transaction from this IP address. Well, who had that IP address? Well, it was a cafe. Okay, well, now let's pull the security footage from this cafe. Who are these people? Okay, boom, boom, boom. All right, that's the person. And now they can start unraveling the web of transactions and implicate people. So
crazy.
Yeah. So if you think that you're completely anonymous on the blockchain, on Bitcoin or anything like that, you probably aren't, unless you've done a lot of work to keep it that way. And so, I certainly don't condone any illegal activity.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah, definitely.
Because the only reason we invited you on the show is to tell people how to do illegal things, Joe. It's just we hadn't told you that yet.
Hey guys, winners don't do drugs.
Oh dear.
You wouldn't steal a car, would you?
Put Doesn't it depend on the circumstances?
He's quoting the movies. What was it about, like stealing videos?
Oh, right.
Yeah,
sorry.
the anti-piracy
Pirating, that's it.
Got it.
trailer or whatever that runs before.
That's right. So Joe, before we kind of switch over, I'm curious because of your knowledge of wallets, and we did a small episode on that. But are there particular wallets, hardware wallets or paper wallets, that you personally prefer above others?
So I have a Ledger, I have a Keep Key, a digital bit box, a
Trezor?
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 Trezor, yeah.
Trezor?
However it's said. It's probably Trezor because it comes that way. I just got the Trezor 1. I have not opened it up yet, but I'm excited by it.
So excited that he didn't open the box.
Well, it's at my other house.
Okay.
Not to sound too pretentious.
No. He's using Snarks to hide he's using Snarks, so it's more like a safe house.
Yeah. Like I would have anything delivered to my safe house. Like, oh, hey.
Well, I don't know. Maybe you're in your safe house right now, Joe. I mean, I can't see you. I can't snark you.
Like I would publicly broadcast my Skype IP address from my safe house. You don't give me enough credit. I'm a security expert and a certified Bitcoin professional.
That's true. You are certified as well. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Congratulations on being certified.
Thank you. So those are the 4 hardware wallets that I have. I like them all in different ways. The digital bit box is super bare bones. It's basically you just plug it in and you touch it to confirm a transaction. But it looks a lot more like a FIDO U2F device. And in fact, it functions as that for the most part. I use it more for FIDO than I do for transactions. And so it sits on my keychain pretty without attracting a lot of attention. The Ledger has amazing support for a bunch of coins, but it'd be difficult to use because if you want to send Bitcoin and Ethereum, you have to get on a device, go into the Bitcoin sub app of the device, send your Bitcoin, exit back out, go into the Ethereum sub app of the device, send Ethereum. You can't just do it with one plugged in like the Trezor or the Keep Key can. So the Trezor, the build quality isn't one that I want to like stick in my pocket and carry around everywhere. The digital bit box feels solid and there's not a lot to break. The Ledger has a little metal case that goes in front, and the things you put on the keychain is just a big ring of plastic. The Trezor is more like, I'm going to keep this in my safe because it's super useful, but it like I put it on my keychain with the little lanyard that it comes with, and the little plastic piece that holds the lanyard onto the thing broke off. So that happened pretty quickly, and luckily it happened in my pocket. If it happened while I was walking somewhere and my Trezor has fallen on the ground somewhere, I would not have been very happy.
No. Just out of curiosity, have you come across another project called Ethos that's building a similar to like a Ledger or a Trezor, but they're using the security chips that are built into the phones so that they're acting as like an offline ledger, but using the chip in the phone instead?
I don't think I've heard of them specifically, but I know it's a matter of time before that happens. So
their project is coming out like they did their ICO last year in June, I think it was, in June 2017, and I believe their product is coming out in the March-April timeframe of 2018, which is pretty soon. So I'm just wanted to see if you'd come across them. I'm sort of looking at it as an alternative just to see what it does, how it works, but it looks pretty interesting.
So one of the main issues of having a wallet on a phone or any internet connected device is your private key is in memory and it's going to be accessed. So some phones and computers have a secure element, or on computers like a trusted platform chip, and having the cryptographic primitives in order to do signing Bitcoin transactions and the like are really important, because the key just gets lodged in there, and you can't pull it out. Now, figuring out how to put it in there securely is kind of difficult, because your seed phrase is going to go through the unsecured portion of the phone, and I'm sure they figured out a way to do that. But not all phones have it. But I do predict that if crypto is going to become an everyday thing, that phones, computers, and the like will just have secure crypto chips that store the keys, so that you don't have problems with bad apps, bad malware, just stealing stuff. So if you take your private key and you copy it to your clipboard on your computer, there's a non-zero chance there's malware on your computer just looking for Bitcoin private keys, and as soon as it sees one in the clipboard, it just sends it off.
Oh my God!
And if
really?
it's gone even deeper, it will just look in memory and say, "Oh, I see one in memory. Let me just send it off to wherever and steal all your money." So hardware wallets are really important.
Just saying that, Joe, just scares me, because even just wanting to take a sequential set of numbers and letters and plugging it in, naturally, I think probably everyone would say the easiest way to do it is you store it somewhere on a PC, copy and paste. And what you just said has just sent tingles of shivers through my whole body of how dangerous and probably unsafe it is to actually be doing that. But you just start to think of the number of possible permutations of how not to store crypto, that starts to make you think, is there any actual way to store it so that you have access to it and not be worried about, the panic button for anything that could go wrong? Because it's such a, on the one hand, it is so secure, but on the other hand, it's so easy to screw it up.
Yep. We'll have to do another episode just on that, because that's...
Oh, yeah, absolutely. In fact, we've probably run out of time today to even talk about shards and masternodes and nodes and mining, which I really wanted to get to. So I'd really love to get you back on the show as maybe one of our technical advisors that just dips in and kind of shares all his nuggets of knowledge, because I still want to know what shards are and more about them. So I think we're going to have to bring you back if you'd like to join us.
Yeah. I'll tease shards a little bit, which is... right now the major networks, Bitcoin, Ethereum, whatever, are limited in the number of transactions they can process at a time, both because every node on the network has to know about every transaction, and also every transaction takes up space. So sharding is a way, and it gets its name from, when you break a pane of glass, you have shards of glass. Right. So here you break up the transactions into or the transaction state into shards, and then only a subset of the network has to process a particular transaction. And so the tricky part of shards is, how can we get the network to communicate, all these little sub networks to communicate as a larger network, so that you can send money across shards without double spending, without fraud, but not having to go to the current state where everyone knows about everything. And so the research and the plans that Ethereum have to go forward to get sharding in place, that's really, really interesting, and we'll have to talk about it another time.
Yeah, indeed, because you actually brought up a few other points about double spending, and then I was going to ask you about, I think they're called uncles. Is that right? I think on Ethereum you have this concept of is that right? It's called an uncle.
I'm not sure. Let me see if that brings up everything on Google. Okay, yeah. Uncles. Those are when two people find a block at roughly the same time, but one of them wins. So yeah, that happens a lot in Bitcoin.
I shard you not. There are uncles.
Yeah. I'm not sure that I had heard of that term that way, and it seems like it's come up recently.
Maybe we're going to have another special episode for Joe called Stump the Tall Joe.
Oh, it's easy because there's so much out there. But like you could I only follow, probably what's going on with a dozen or so currencies and technologies, and there are thousands out there. So it's pretty easy to stump me if you go off into the weeds.
Well, we're not going to go. How would you say? We're not going to go off. I was going to say off piste, but that's not what I really wanted to say. Off fork, off chain. We're not going to go off chain on you.
Okay. Yeah.
I shard you not. We're not going to go off chain. We're going to have to start having our own, fork you language.
Yep.
Anyway, Joe, it's been an absolute pleasure. We obviously need to get you back to talk about sharding, uncles, nodes, and all sorts of other wacky nimble wimbles, I think was the other term you gave us.
Nimble wimble.
Right,
yes.
So we're not going to tell anybody what a nimble wimble is, but we will cover that one when we get you back next. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today to our fantastic technical episode of the Coin Chat. To the moon. Until next week.